Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as Forty20. Joining me for another week of the NRL and Parramatta Eels through the 2022-2023 preseason are my good mates Sixties and Clint, who is back. And it's good to have him back. Fellas, how are we holding up on this rather stifling and sticky day?
Well, it is a stifling and sticky day. I took a little dip in the pool today, but I'm more concerned about our good mate Clint. Have you bounced back, mate? Are you ready to get stuck in?
Well, for starters, I've got a voice. So that's always good when you're recording a podcast. Unfortunately, last week I didn't. But yes, I'm absolutely on the mend and ready to rip in, gents. But I must say that this is an awful day to come back with this heat, because if you boys are anything like me, I naturally run hot. I feel like I know scientifically I don't, but I feel like I run a lot hotter than other people. You know when you extend your hand and you meet strangers, or you throughout your day with your business dealings, and you're like, oh, that person's got a cold hand. Yeah, I'm that guy with he's got the warm hand. He's running hot, and the second it gets a couple degrees hotter, I'm struggling again. So it's, although I got my voice back, I kind of feel like I'm back where I was with the sweats last week.
Yeah, I'm a husky in winter. I'm fine, but when it comes to summer, it's the reverse.
It's a struggle, isn't it?
Especially once the humidity starts to climb up past 40-50% and starts getting to that real tropical sticky. It's not good.
Now, fellas, before we do our usual shout-outs, can I do a special shout-out to some of our listeners? As you know, we get some amazing listener numbers to the tip sheet. It absolutely blows our minds that we have so many people that want to listen to us jabber on about the Parramatta Eels and rugby league in general. But we are so appreciative of it. And I just wanted to shout out to Ron over in America, Rocky up in Queensland, and Andrew down in Victoria. Those fellas have recently been sharing their Spotify stats, which have the tip sheet featuring right up there in their top listening podcasts for the year. And even to the extent where Andrew sits in our top 2% of listeners with, get this, almost 6,300 minutes of listening to the tip sheet in 2023. Now, that's an amazing stat.
Incredible.
But what's even more amazing is that those numbers don't have him sitting in the top 1%.
I'm disregarding that stat, 60s, because that commitment deserves to be top 1% in my book. So, it's not often that we just ignore the stat line here, but on this occasion we are, because that is some amazing listening, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of meeting Andrew. He made the trip up from Victoria to watch training one day up at Kellyville. And we got permission to go and stand on the veranda at the Eels centre up there at Eels HQ at Kellyville. And we stood there it was pouring rain that particular day. So he brought the Melbourne weather up with him. We stood there and watched the training in the pouring rain. But, mate, we really appreciate your support. And it's very humbling for us as podcasters with a niche podcast when you're talking about things in general that are out there, and we're talking about the Parramatta Eels, to get the sort of listening numbers that we get. It, as I said, it's just mind-blowing for us. And thank you to all of our listeners, every one of you, because you give us that encouragement to turn up every week and to get these podcasts out there for you. So, yeah, thanks again.
And while we're doing shout-outs, as always, a quick shout-out to the sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf North Mead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Fantastic partners for the tip sheet.
News team, assemble!
Now, fellas, there's a whole lot of Eels news that I want to go through, but there's a part of me that almost feels like I want to charge through it to get to what intermission music 40 has lined up for us this week. So don't forget about that, listeners. We've got 40's next pick for intermission music coming up after we get through the Eels news. But I want to kick things off by giving a shout out to a fella who is, well, he's one of the most respected men, if not the most respected man in the Parramatta Junior Rugby League. He's retiring after spending 43 years in the Parramatta District Junior Rugby League, all sorts of committee positions. He's been the secretary, the assistant secretary. He's been on the board of management. Look, what can you say about a bloke who, let's put this in perspective, his time with the Parramatta Junior Rugby League started before the Eels won their first premiership.
Wow.
Started in 1980. So we'll put that into perspective. He's seen a lot of changes in his time, but that man is Barry Guy. I had the honour of interviewing him on behalf of the Parramatta Junior Rugby League last Thursday up at Kellyville. The video of that interview is being given to Barry as a thank you and a tribute to him. They're going to be showing that particular video at their AGM. It will be passed on to TCT so that we can put it up on our YouTube channel as well. I think you'll probably find it'll be on the Parramatta Junior Rugby League socials as well, their Facebook page, their Instagram page. But yes, Barry, a lifetime of dedication to the Eels. And how's this? He doesn't have just one life membership with the club. He actually has two. He received a life membership back in 1996 with the Junior Rugby League. He was then given a life membership with the seniors, with the Parramatta National Rugby League, I think presented to him by Dennis Fitzgerald in 2007. Now, that's quite the achievement to get two life memberships with the club. It gives an indication of the esteem to which he is held. He was I thoroughly enjoyed meeting Barry. I hadn't met him before last week. We had a bit of a chat on the phone before we met in person to do the interview. He's a very humble man. He didn't want to talk about things in terms of like personal achievements. It was, as I said, very humble. And another thing too, the bloke in more recent years has been travelling down from up near Newcastle, from around Swansea, travelling down to fulfil duties. So he just loves the club. Very emotional talking about getting life memberships. So, yeah, special shout out to Barry Guy. Thanks for everything you've done for the club, Barry. And, people should have a bit of a look out for the video, just the tribute to him and just Barry in his own words speaking about his time in the juniors. Fellas, what did you think of the footage of the Eels in the Sand Hills training last Friday? John?
I've done the Wanda Sand Dunes once, and yeah, that was enough for my lifetime. So that resonated with me, and I can only imagine how much harder they would have been driven. On top of the fact they were doing skills work on the dunes after. So really good work from the media team, and obviously the boys were digging in real deep on Friday. And it's always good to see that kind of footage, and it's a reminder of as much as we complain about how these guys perform sometimes, they definitely put in the hard yards.
John, I want to know what was the context of you doing the Sandhills?
My cousin wanted to go to Cronulla one day out that way, and it's like, while we're here, why don't we run the sand dunes a few times? And yeah, did it a few times, and I can't say I ran all of it, but you like with the boys there, when you see them starting into the steeper parts, you're essentially just like crawling up the hill at times.
Hang on. I just want to get this straight. You ran the sand dunes there on a whim. on a whim.
On a whim,
40.
yeah. My cousin was real big into fitness at that time, so dragged me along and whatnot, and did a few laps of them, and I can knock that one off the bucket list, I suppose. But yeah, they would have done it at a much higher level, and it is unforgiving.
Clint, can you match any of John's insanity there?
Yeah, I have also done the Wanda sand dunes, sand hills, and I can echo his sentiments. That is far from pleasant, particularly when you're for our listeners out there, I'm quite pale in complexion, so the sun is rather unforgiving.
You're getting blasted on both sides,
times.
from behind and on the reflection from the sand.
Yeah, and then like your skin's glistening from all the sweat as well, so you just become
refracting the beams everywhere.
Yeah. So you can feel yourself going red from all the energy that you're exhausting, and then that redness stays with you for another 3-4 days as you battle sunstroke. So, it's not fun.
I do have my own experience to share. It's not quite like that, but out of curiosity, when I was about 20, maybe 21, I decided to walk along the beach from the north entrance to Soldiers Beach. Now, I had no concept of what that distance would be like on sand, let alone on sand that obviously when you're trying to look for the hard sand, once you get sick of walking in the soft sand and you're looking for the hard sand to walk on, is angled to, at probably about 30 degrees. So by the time that the hours had passed that it took to walk that distance, I think my hip was out of alignment from the from the uneven surface that I was walking on. But yeah, that was in much younger years, and I will say that I regretted it once I was about an hour into the walk and realised this was going to take a lot longer than 1 hour of walking. So, but I can't imagine what those players were put through. Fellas, the feedback that I've had has been nothing but positive. It's the squad as a whole, though. The staff were really pleased with how they went. As always, as has been the case this pre-season, the Pathways players continue to kick goals, continue to get noticed for all the right reasons. So they're going ultra strong in this pre-season. Did you also notice that the footage captured BA and the staff running the hills as well?
Yeah, no surprises there.
No.
And what's fantastic is as of tomorrow, we're going to get a proper look at that weekend. Or actually, no, correct me if I'm right here, gents. I'm not sure if the Wanda Sandhills are included in it, but we're getting a documentary dropping tomorrow night, about
Correct.
a 15-minute long documentary that shows shows some of the preseason training. So we'll get an even closer look at some of the efforts the boys have been putting in.
Yeah, that's actually from the previous week.
Week.
Yeah, so they had a change up of their schedule for the last 2 weeks, and it's involved the last session of the week being at different locations, and obviously we saw the Sandhills for this Friday just gone. The previous week, it wasn't the Friday, I believe it was the Thursday. They were out on location elsewhere. I know where it was. I'm not going to give that away before the media on it drops, because the media's been the session was kept quite hush hush. There hasn't been anything that's been put out about it. I'd much rather people see it when it drops, but what you're going to see is certainly a lot of different challenges that they put to them as part of a pre-season session. The sort of stuff that's going to be great for bonding for a group that's looking to bounce back next season with much better team performances. I think it was, the feedback that I've had was that it was an extremely valuable experience for them. And like yourselves, I'm looking forward to seeing it, because I've only had a little bit of feedback I haven't had any strong details on what was involved. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the footage as well. The other thing too, just on the Wanda Sandhills, was on Friday afternoon, I was at Parramatta Leagues Club. There was a special Movember event that was held mid-afternoon. And one of the guests there was Sean Lane. Now, he'd been out there running the sand dunes in the morning, and then mid-afternoon, there he is as a guest speaker at Parramatta Leagues Club talking about men's health. He was joined by Tim Manor and Dave Gower. There was a panel discussion hosted by Simone from the Be Unstoppable Foundation. It was it was used as the culmination for the Movember fundraising done by the Parramatta Leagues Club mow growing team. The end of the session, we learned that there was about $5,800 that was raised by those growing their moustaches in the Parramatta Leagues Club moustache growing team. And then the Leagues Club doubled that to take it to $11,600 that was being donated to Movember and Men's Health. But fellas, the stories, the anecdotes, the experiences that were being shared by Sean Lane, Tim Manor, and David Gower, I thought it was exceptional. The presentation, how candid these fellas were, and it wasn't talking about just struggles with mental health, because one of the things about mental health is also to concentrate on the positive. And so the fellas were not just sharing about how the importance of mental health, but some of the strategies that they've been educated about over the years, the sort of people that are in their support network. And Sean Lane, ever articulate, ever intelligent, he was talking about his studies that he's been doing on positive psychology. And look, I thought it was a great event. It was well attended at the club, and I'm looking forward to Sean Lane's documentary that he's going to be putting out. I think it's early in the new year, isn't it? On positive mental health and mental health for that athletes around the world. Some of the issues that they have to deal with. So, it was a big afternoon at Parramatta Leagues Club, and good on Sean Lane for fronting up after such an exhausting morning.
Yeah, big effort.
Clint, just a little bit of information about another thing then on Saturday morning with the Pathways players.
Yeah, the junior reps had a massive day out at Parramatta Marist, where they did an all-day training session, an information session for parents. So it's sort of part of the induction process for those boys that have been selected in Harold Matt's SG Ball for 2024. So they had their all-in big session there on the Saturday, and I guess this is sort of like the big preparation ahead of the season before Christmas, as they roll into the new year, because they go straight into trials in the season after that. So, it was good to have our 2024 junior rep players and squads, I guess, brought up to speed in the Parramatta way, if you want to call it as such.
Yep, absolutely. Dave Gower there running the information session there for the parents. The facilities, of course, at Maris Brothers over there at Westmead includes a very big auditorium, so it can accommodate a large number of parents. Obviously, when you're talking about the junior representative squads, so they're large squads at this stage, you'd have lots of parents, but also other family members and friends that would be there as well, just to get some of the information there about what's happening for them, and obviously the talk that's there about having that balance between football and studies and home life and that sort of thing. So, and that's where Dave Gower, as head of the welfare and education at Parramatta, has such an important role that he has to play. So it was, twofold process there. They've got the big training session that they had there. So you had the SG Ball, Harold Matz, Tasha Gale, all there at that venue. And whilst they're out there training, you've also got the parents involved in their information session. So congratulations on the club on what would have been a very big event to organise there. That then rolled into, as far as our news is concerned, the BGA Christmas drinks at the Royal Oak Hotel in Parramatta. Now, unfortunately, the original Royal Oak, which was a famous watering hole for Eels players and indeed also Eels supporters, is no longer with us. It was demolished to make way for the light rail. That's a whole other issue, seeing so the light rail is, got no idea when that's going to start, but
May 24. May
May
2024.
Well, let's hope it then sticks to that. But it was demolished as part of that. Maybe there can be an argument that they didn't have to demolish the pub, but they did. There's now a new Royal Oak, which is across the road in a new premises, and that's where the BGA held their Christmas party. Billy Richards and the committee, they do a great job. Well, they really do, fellas, bringing the all of the former players and staff, the graded players and staff, together for different events during the year. You've got the Ted Solkowitz Memorial Golf Day. You've got the annual Players Reunion, which has the last couple of years has been a reunion weekend. You've also got the Christmas drinks, and I'm not sure whether they're planning something else that will be big on the calendar, but they're certainly three of the main events that they have during the season. What was remarkable about this one was we had a group of players from the Brad Arthur era part of the reunion this week. So a number of players there. The notables, Corey Norman was there. We had Dave Gower, of course, Isaac De Goys, Brad Takarangi, Andy Davey, the most recent player there, Kaiser Pritchard, CSA Avave. Who else do we have? Timmy Manor, of course, was there. My apologies if I'm missing out anyone else that was there from the BA. Yes, Nathan Brown. Nathan Brown also made an appearance. So he got there a little bit later, but I thought that was great to see Nathan there. Daniel Alvaro. Shouldn't have forgotten Daniel at all. So, Daniel was there. So it was good to see that. Daniel most recently was he was playing over in France, but he's now returned. Same as Corey Norman. Corey Norman, I think, was playing over in France as well. So it was good to see all those fellas there. They certainly enjoyed themselves. Every time there was someone new walking through the door, you'd hear the raucous cheer for them as they arrived. And, of course, there was the other players from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s that were represented there. So, good gathering. And you know what? I think it's really important to get as many of the players, not just from the BA era, but also I'd like to see some more, say, from the Brian Smith era get along, because the players who are the more recently retired, even if we're going back over a decade, the players that are more recently retired, they're going to be the future of the BGA. They're the area where the BGA is going to grow. And and I guess they'll be the ones that'll help to promote it to more and more footballers. So it was a good event. It was I thought it was the best that I've attended in terms of the Christmas drinks. And I guess the other thing is stand by for the reunion next year, because Billy and the BGA committee are aiming to have the big Back to Parra Day next year. I believe the reunion's going to be around round 6, real early in this season. But they're trying to get as many former players and officials as they possibly can, so that, well, the goal is to get everyone, and every former graded player and official. That would be quite a feat, and I don't know where they'd accommodate them, but that is the goal. So we'll see how that goes. Let's round off the Eels news, John. A young signing for the Eels pathways, we have to assume, who's got an NFL background.
Yeah, reports today that the Eels have offered a contract to young Jai Camilleri, who's a Queenslander, who most recently earned selection for the Australian merit team in the National Schoolboy Gridiron Championships. So this is the Australian version of American football, and he's obviously done very well there. Jai plays on both, as you'll want to do when you're playing in these levels. You play both sides of the ball, whereas when you make the NFL, you pick a side and specialise. But he played running back on the offensive side and linebacker on the defensive side, which is the natural pairing when you're playing both sides of the football. And yeah, he's picked up a contract with the Parramatta Eels to play SG ball and potentially Jersey flag. And he projects, or I believe he plays, as a dummy half when he's playing the 13 SI code. So he'll come into Parramatta's systems as a hooker, and probably a run-dominant dummy half, you have to think, given that he's a running back in American football.
Yeah, I wonder when he'll be joining the program then.
I think he's made the move to Sydney, so I imagine he'll be in the program for this coming season.
Okay, so
he's finished school and he's moved to Sydney, I believe. So I assume he'll be part of the program for season 2024.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether he's part of the preseason already. If it's progressed that far, and like this is slightly older news in terms of the announcement, and whether he's already part of the preseason for the SG ball. They'll be having a trial. They usually have a trial before Christmas, and then a couple of trials in January. We'll have to chase up and see whether he's been part of the training at this stage. I might throw that bit of research Clint's way. I reckon, Clint, you might be good for trying to find out something like that, or if not, I'll try and do a bit of digging around as well.
You're getting the magnifying glass out as we speak.
Okay, fellas. Well, that brings us to the end of our Eels news. And as we head into the NRL news, you know what to do, 40.
Now, I will give you $20 if you can guess where that's from.
Gee,
Quint might have an outside chance of getting in the ballpark.
I would suggest that I have no chance, even though I was going looking for a glow stick to start dancing.
I don't want to say. I don't want to be disingenuous and try and suggest that I know it, but the tune sounds vaguely familiar at the same time.
It would.
Geez, this could be anything from a game show or from a video game to.
Oh, he's getting warm. I like it.
Is this from something from Jackbox?
No. If you can name, I'll say no to that. If you can name the console that it comes from, I'll shout you a drink next time we catch up.
I'm going to say console. Okay, well, that rules out PC, and I know that John's a PC man, so I'm going to say Nintendo 64.
Oh, one generation too far. The Super Nintendo. This is the Mario Paint music. So.
Of course.
Yeah, there's a whole raft of classic sort of was it 8-bit or 16-bit tunes from that era that are actually surprisingly good music. But yeah, Mario Paint.
You know, I almost said that it could have been like Italian puppets. And then you paused, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, it's clearly nothing to do with that."
I am speechless. I am without speech.
And that's
Okay.
that's not even weird on the backlog of stuff I've got for this. So get ready. We'll be going genuinely multicultural soon.
I'm sure we're going to get to the point where there's going to be people putting in requests for intermission music, John. Such as the work that you're doing. The main talk each week is going to be about what will the TCT intermission music be this week.
I'm half waiting for you to whip out the Barney Gumble when he does the tape
Barney
mix
Stinson
with Yoko as a little nod to Sixties.
Oh,
I think there's going to be a surge in top listeners in 2024 when we continue this.
We'll be trending on Twitter at this rate, or X, whatever it is these days.
Okay, fellas, NRL news. John, can you talk to me about the term staff writers that seems to be used for organisations?
I mean, it's a nebulous term that I feel like incorporates a lot of interns and either unpaid or lowly paid people that just have to churn out the content for whatever given network or company they're working for. And unfortunately, with the slipping editorial standards and the fact that these people are either pumping out content or chat GPT content out, you get some pretty funny slip-ups.
Yeah, although I'm not sure that Dane Laurie is necessarily laughing about a slip-up with this most recent one where the photo of one Dane Laurie, the wrong Dane Laurie, was used to accompany the story about the other Dane Laurie spending time incarcerated for a particular crime.
Given who he's employed with, they're just as liable to fire him, taking that as facts as presented. So, you know, poor guy.
Oh, there's obviously quite a furor on social media as a result of this. There's former NRL players aren't happy about it. If you were the Dane Laurie that was wrongly pictured, you'd certainly be looking at getting some form of financial retribution for what has transpired there. Even though I believe it was corrected later, it's still... Do you know what, Clint? I don't know about you, but I wonder what is the motivation of journalists writing about the game that provides them with an income. It's their living. They make a living reporting on the game, but they have the motivation to churn out an article like this, which in reality is bringing up past indiscretions. It's not like a topical issue right now. It's dragging out the past again for all these people. Why? I mean, look, I think I can guess why they do it, but really, why would you?
Well, it's easy content, unfortunately, and it's straight out of the Daily Mail playbook. And you know, we kind of circle back to what 40 was talking about there in relation to staff writers. You know, that nebulous term for faceless interns / up and coming staff members who are trying to establish themselves as journalists. These are the tasks and duties that hit their desk, and you know, I don't point the blame at those people. You know, they're kids just trying to get a start in journalism, and they're following the direction of more senior journalists and editors who should know better. And when we're talking about the fact that, you the game gives them a job as well. You think that they would be the biggest advocates and the biggest supporters. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't critique things or ignore things that have happened, but there's no inciting incident to bring this up. This is just something that's been unorganically brought up for the sake of, well, we need to fill some space during the off season. There's no real news breaking. It's like, well, you know what? Why don't you get out off your seat, out of the office, and down to any number of the team's preseason training, and try and grab a yarn with someone. I get that it's not as polarizing and it's not going to get as many clicks because it is classic clickbait in the truest sense of the form. But I tell you what, you maintain your dignity as a writer, and you go a long way to establishing respect with the audience. I get that your stats tell you that people do supposedly want to read about this, but it's the shock factor that's making them click. They're not hanging around to engage with the information because they're, oh, well, that sure is awesome that you could make a prison 13 or whatever. No, and I think we're well within our rights as supporters of not only our team but the game to be holding our journalists to a higher standard. The best way that we can do that, and I hope that our listeners take this as a bit of direction, is do the classic, just don't look. Don't click on it. You see something like that, do not encourage it by clicking on it.
And Clint, you really, what you said resonated about get out there and talk to players and find some stories to write about that are genuine stories.
They're out there.
Look, we put out the training reports as often as I can get them out there, and the people our readers enjoy those. We get thousands of reads on each one of those training reports, and I have no access to getting comments from the players. All right, it's not part of the Cumberland Throw.
What you've done, Sixties, is shown the blueprint for these journalists that all they have to do is get off their seat and in the car.
Yeah, and it's original content.
Simple. Yeah,
it's original content. It's observations, but in contrast to what we can produce on the Cumberland Throw, the journalists get access to the players. They get far better access to the players. And anyone that's tried to go through and getting NRL accreditation,
it's a process.
It's
a process and a half.
Yeah. Look, I've tried. I gave it my best shot. It's it just look. It is what it is in terms of the access that we don't get, but it hasn't stopped us from producing content that is original and is based on what we see and what we get told as well. And obviously what we get told, there's plenty that we don't report on as well. It's a fine line that we work. It's a bit of a juggling act. We like to think what it allows us to do is we're able to write from a place of knowledge without crossing any lines.
Yeah, without giving the farm away.
Yeah, so it's very disappointing to see this from those that make a living out of rugby league. We, as you said, you do expect that they're not going to cover up, big stories, that they will report on it, even if they're negative. However, come on, they could do better with this. And staff writers, that term staff writers, that's no better than just putting anonymous. They could literally put anonymous on
the
that.
Get out of jail free card.
Yeah, and it would be just as accurate. And I guess the only thing where they can say, well, it's not really anonymous, is that if something is printed that is libelous, that then the media organisation can be held accountable for doing it because they've published it, the editors approved it. It's gone through an approval process with that photo, that erroneous photo in there, which is, that calls the process into question as well. But yeah, I mean, we all go crook about the fact that online there's a whole lot of anonymous trolls that make life difficult for players or officials or even journalists, right? Get stuck into journalists. And they have every right to complain about people who are anonymous keyboard warriors, all right? But staff writers, that's as good as saying anonymous as far as I'm concerned. Okay, John, Fafita, a pectoral injury, not a complete tear, a partial tear. How long is he going to be out for?
Well, once upon a time, the torn pec was a pretty serious injury, or sort of up there in relative terms to an ACL. But it feels like the jumps they've made, especially when it's not a complete tear, mean that it's far from the death sentence it was for a season that it once was. So he's projected to return for round one. So he'll rehab through the preseason. Obviously, he's going to be a bit underdone as a result. But the Titans do have him projected to return for the start of the 2024 season.
Has Makahesi got the same projection? Because he has a pectoral injury as well.
The club's last injury update had him returning for round one, I believe, if I recall correctly. I'll have a scout around to try and find it, but I'm pretty certain that the injury update did have him slated. Here it is. Where is Makatoa? Makatoa expect to return 2024. So that's a 12-month slate, but he's got the same the same designation as Dejan, Witteramu, Quint, and Junior, and obviously Arthur Miller-Steven. Unfortunately, he's back in 2025. So I would have Makahesi Makatoa as not that he necessarily is in the round one team on depth chart standings, but he'd be available for selection in round one, whether it's NRL or Cup.
Yeah, and seeing as though you've just mentioned as well, a bit of a shout out there to Artie. Artie, mate, hope the rehab goes well, that you're on track, and that we get to see you running around again in 2025. It was really bad luck to have such an injury at the end of this season. Let's hope we see you back where you were, shining for the Eels out the back and on the wing in 2025. So, and a shout out to your family as well, who I know are listeners to the podcast, Artie. So, keep going, keep slogging away, mate. We're thinking of you. John, while I've got you there on the injuries, you were monitoring this before. Carl Alawapu, still no decision on what he's going to do.
Yeah, it's a very... I suppose tense, now is a situation for the Bulldogs and Awapu. He's got the neck injury sustained late in the season 2023. And what was initially proposed to be a sort of year off maybe, or a half year off into rehabilitating, now we're not really sure where his future lies. And there was some gossip column work from the DT talking about a standoff between a young player and the club about trying to medically retire. And there's a couple of players that fit that bill. Alapu was one of them. I think Jack Howarth at the Melbourne Storm might be another. So there might be a little bit more tension here than we see on the surface, boys. With a young player that had a lot of hype coming from the Brisbane Broncos down to the Canterbury Bulldogs, picking up that unfortunate neck injury, and now one camp wants him to push through long and save his career long term, the player, and potentially the other side want him to medically retire.
Clint, do you think the Bulldogs would have had higher hopes for where Carl Alawapu, where he got to in 2023? I mean, do you think he failed to live up to the hype, or was the hype unreasonable and unfair on such a young player?
Oh, definitely the latter. Definitely the hype was unreasonable and unfair on such a player. The Bulldogs, and I've said this a number of times this year, they're slinging as much recruitment, as many players as they can possibly recruit against the wall and hoping that something sticks. And, there's plenty of Hail Marys that are being thrown. And you do that with some young halves, and you throw them out there into the deep end and go and hope that they will shine and that they might be the silver bullet for your problems. Unfortunately for Canterbury, there's a little bit more to it than just the halves there. And I think it's unreasonable if anyone had the expectation, regardless of what they paid. Like, they paid what they paid in terms of a transfer fee, and then subsequently signing him on a long-term deal there. But if you had the expectation that he was going to come in there and suddenly make them a top 8 team or a top 4 team, well, I've got some news about the sport of rugby league for you. This is a tale as old as time. So it's it'd be completely unfair to have those expectations. So no, like any young kid coming into grade, regardless of their pedigree, should not be viewed through that lens, because as we know here, it takes somewhere between 50 to 100 NRL games to really find a standing as either a forward or even more so as a spine player. I will exclude fullback and probably the outside backs from that discussion point, because they normally have the opportunity to shine by virtue of the work of the team around them in a strong team in those positions. But a half or a forward who's trying to establish themselves as a either the main playmaker or the alpha forward, the leader of the pack, if you want to call them as such, it takes some time to establish yourself. So I don't think, regardless of your pedigree, that anyone should be viewed through that lens. But what the Bulldogs do have at the moment now is a sticky situation with a player who we don't know if he'll come back or not, and who's on big money, and they've got a vested interest in trying to free up as much money as possible, because they're interested in the pursuit of both Jerome Luai and Adam Fanua-Blake. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, that there might be that internal push from theirs, because they want to utilize this. They want to free up whatever funds he's on, whatever he's on against the cap, and utilize that to strengthen their squad.
Well, the next furore could happen at the West Tigers, because we've had Adam Dwahi get into a little bit of strife. Now, we're not gonna dive into what he said or the issues that he's got himself involved in there. However, apparently it's now under investigation by the West Tigers, and they're going to decide what they need to do with what he's done. I think anytime you're talking about looking into a player, and that player just happens to be suffering from a long-term injury and has a history of long-term injuries, and the club has a history of parting ways with people, you wonder where it's heading. John, anything you want to throw in there?
I mean, we've seen a similar issue play out the other year with the Manly Seven, and it's pretty clear that across the rugby league landscape, there's a pretty heavy dose of conservative value when it comes to those matters. What I'd say to players like Adam is, like, why do you feel the need to go on social media and talk about it? Like, it is one thing to have those beliefs, whether you are aligned with them or not, and I'd say most people aren't these days. But the fact that you have to go out and comment on them, just you're literally making yourself a target. It is just stupid. So he's going to reap what he sowed, and whether that means like on the rugby league drama scale, it is a solid 1 out of 10. But it is being driven pretty hard by the media right now, so it's going to be interesting to see what sort of fallout we see from it.
Yeah, and again, this is, I guess, a media that's dealing with a pretty quiet off-season / preseason so far, and looking for something to write about, as we saw before, where they have to dig up the past to put out something controversial. Now they're, as you said, making something that's a 1 and trying to drive it into a 7, an 8, or a 9 on the scale of troubles. So, but we might just leave that one there. Finally, the pursuit for Adam Fanua-Blake has grown just a little bit more. What's happening there, John?
Yeah, the Cronulla Sharks, the most recent club, linked to him now, and again, it's hard to see how the finances work given that Cronulla have just locked up a whole ton of talent. But they tend to run their ship pretty tightly. So if the Bulldogs, can be in the hunt for Fanua Blake, why can't the Sharks? And they've got a number of senior forwards, probably headlined by Dale Finucane, who will eventually free up some space in the top 30 when they wind down their careers, which will probably coincide with getting Fanua Blake. But yeah, it's interesting because Adam's a bit older than I thought. He's turning 30, I think. He's been around for a while. So, a lot of clubs going all in. We're talking, seven figures a season now, $1 million a year for a player who is very talented, but, he is in his peak and trending downwards, you'd have to argue, based on what we know of props.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong here, John, originally in Parramatta's pathway system?
Yeah, it was in the Eels pathway system until he was 15 years old, I believe, and some ill discipline away from the field saw him part ways with the club. He went to the Dragons, I believe, was a star in their Jersey Flag or equivalent program. It was the NYC back then, and then got tossed out for some domestic violence stuff, I believe. Got given a lifeline by Manly, and that's when he started to make his name as a player. And, to his credit, I don't think he's been linked to any other issues since then. But aside from getting away from Sydney to get away from an unsavoury crowd was the excuse used to get to the Warriors, if I recall correctly. So he hasn't been, on the wrong path since, but he was a Parramatta prospect that the club probably made the right decision on in terms of culture at the time.
And if you had to, Clint, make a prediction as to where AFB will find himself in 2025, and we're going to assume that he will play out the season in 24 with the Warriors, what would be your tip for 25, Clint?
I'd be very surprised if he doesn't end up at the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. They're the ones with the means and real desire for that alpha male forward leader. And, I know they've got to do a bit of a balancing of the books, but Gus generally finds a way when he wants his man.
Yeah, we just have the feeling that that the canine sombrero is going to do some fine work again. And just before we go, fellas, I think there was a bit of an article recently that listed some rugby union prospects that the Waratahs were putting into development squads and were going to be basing their future on. And there were some Eels Junior Pathways players listed in that. My mail is that those Eels Junior Pathways players who were on that list are tied to contracts till around 2025 with the Eels. So I think there might have been some concern from fans reading that, thinking that it was more young players lost by the Eels, but I believe that they are under contract for at least a couple more years. So that might be a case of rugby union spruiking itself and not being entirely accurate in doing so. Okay, well, I think that just about wraps things up. Any late breaking news at all, John? That's
one
around
quick
the track.
pass. The Dragons and Dolphins are chasing the young Cowboys prospect Kulikefu Finafuiaki, who we saw in the most recent season past. Good back row prospect, but there's some. Yeah, that's about it, I think. The Panthers are still trying to keep Jerome Luai, apparently. I think they've extended their duration of their offer compared to because it was a 2-year, $1.7 million deal, wasn't it, originally? And I think they might be considering upping the duration of that contract. So they haven't specified, but more than 2 years is the article from the Sydney Morning Herald. And that's about it. I think it's been a pretty chill news week for rugby league. Not too much drama outside of the Adam Dewey stuff or Dwahi stuff, and even then, like we said, not to downplay it because the context is still important in the conversation being held across not just rugby league but the world in general. But on a rugby league drama scale, it's a pretty solid one. So yeah, it's been a pretty solid week.
Well, fellas, I reckon this is a pretty solid podcast. I'm going to give us an 8 out of 10
Hey,
for tonight's efforts. Clint and John, probably if I'm going to give some personal scores, I might up the two of you to 9s out of 10. I give myself a 6 or a 7, so that's where we're going to average out to an 8 out of 10 for the podcast. Thank you for your efforts tonight. Thank you to all of our listeners who tune in regularly, and especially those people that have us up there in their top 5 podcasts for the year. We really appreciate that. And also, of course, to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. We thank you for your support as always. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.